My name is John, and I'm 80 years old. Over the years, I've learned that some of life's hardest lessons come not from the things we do, but from the things we fail to do. One of those lessons came from losing touch with an old friend, someone who had been like a brother to me. It wasn't just the pain of losing that connection. It was the regret of knowing I'd let pride get in the way. But that experience taught me something profound about forgiveness, a lesson that changed how I approach relationships to this day. Stay with me, because this story might just help you think differently about the power of forgiveness in your own life. He wasn't just a friend. He was my closest confidant. We met in school, two young boys who bonded over a shared sense of humor and a love for adventure. We were inseparable. From fishing trips to late-night conversations about our dreams, he was the person I trusted with everything. For years, our friendship was my anchor. But as time passed, life began to pull us in different directions. Then came the argument, the kind of disagreement that shouldn't have mattered, but somehow grew bigger with each passing day. We stopped talking. At first, I thought the silence was temporary, but weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. Neither of us reached out, and that bond, once so strong, slowly faded away. I didn't know it then, but losing touch with him would become one of the greatest regrets of my life. Thinking back to the early days of our friendship always brings a smile to my face. We were inseparable. Whether we were building tree houses, skipping rocks on the creek, or dreaming about our futures, he was the one person who made me feel understood. There's one memory that stands out above the rest. It was a cold winter evening, and I was going through one of the toughest times of my life. Without me even asking, he showed up at my doorstep with a thermos of hot coffee and said, "Let's talk." He didn't give advice or try to fix things. He just sat there, listening, offering his presence. That was the kind of friend he was. But even the strongest friendships can be fragile when pride gets in the way. And that's exactly what happened to us. The argument we had wasn't anything dramatic. It started with a misunderstanding, a few heated words exchanged, and then silence. At the time, it felt justified, like I was standing my ground. But looking back now, I realize how petty it all was. We were both too stubborn to apologize, to pick up the phone and say, "Hey, let's talk this through." Instead, we let pride build a wall between us, one brick at a time. The longer we went without talking, the harder it became to break the silence. I told myself, he'll call me if he cares, while he was probably thinking the same thing about me. And just like that, a friendship that had been such an important part of my life faded into the background. At the time, I didn't realize the cost of that silence, but I would soon learn. Years later, I got a call from an old mutual friend. I hadn't thought about him in a while, but hearing his name brought back a flood of memories. The news hit me like a punch to the gut. My friend had passed away unexpectedly. I can't even describe the wave of emotions that followed. Shock, sadness, and most of all, regret. In that moment, all the reasons we stopped talking seemed so trivial. The details of our argument didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the fact that I would never get the chance to make things right. I sat in silence for hours that day, replaying our memories in my mind. I kept thinking about all the times I could have reached out but didn't, about all the words left unsaid. The regret was overwhelming. That day, I realized something I wish I'd understood much earlier in life. Forgiveness isn't about the other person. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of resentment. Holding on to that grudge hadn't just cost me my friendship, it had weighed on me, even if I didn't fully recognize it at the time. The pride I thought was protecting me had only kept me from something far more valuable, the love and connection we once shared. The Stoics often remind us of the fleeting nature of life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. If only I had lived with that awareness back then, maybe I wouldn't have let pride keep me from reaching out. From that moment on, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't let pride or anger stand in the way of my relationships ever again. After losing my friend, I began to take a hard look at the other relationships in my life. Were there people I had drifted away from? Were there unresolved conflicts I had avoided? I made it a point to reconnect with those I'd lost touch with. Some conversations were awkward, others emotional, but every single one was worth it. There was one friend, in particular, I hadn't spoken to in years. We had argued over something silly, much like before. This time I picked up the phone, apologized for my part, and asked if we could start fresh. To my surprise, he had been waiting for the same thing. That friendship, which I could have easily lost forever, became one of the most meaningful parts of my life. Forgiveness, I learned, is a gift you give not just to others, but to yourself. It frees you from the weight of resentment and opens the door to healing and connection. Losing touch with my old friend was one of the greatest regrets of my life. But his loss taught me a lesson I'll carry forever. Life is too short to let pride or anger stand in the way of love. We all make mistakes. We all have moments where we let our emotions get the best of us. But at the end of the day, what matters most are the people we care about and the relationships we nurture. So let me ask you, is there someone in your life you've lost touch with? Someone you've been meaning to reach out to but haven't? Don't wait too long, because the time you have with the people you love is far more precious than any argument or grudge. Have you ever experienced the pain of losing touch with someone and learning a hard lesson about forgiveness? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If this story resonated with you, give it a like and share it with someone who might need a reminder about the power of forgiveness. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel, John the Stoic, for more stories, reflections, and timeless wisdom. Let's keep learning, growing, and healing together.